Ruchem Aboim B'Shem Hashem. Shem Shir, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's share on Dine Tiltal Muktza, La'Tzorech, Gufo, Mekayimai. Moving using Muktza on Shabbos. I would like to sponsor a share called Shir, 718-851-8651. Email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
I was thinking the school to learn Torah is when people ask you shilas. And I thought I knew the sugya of Kalishim Lachtalissa. It's a basically simple sugya. And I had two shilas that started me on a journey to a whole new aspect of Kalishim Lachtalissa. Someone asked me, he was by a Shabbos suit and his neighbor came knocking on the door, if he could borrow pliers. Now Shabbos, to borrow pliers is strange. What happened was his children opened the soda, they're having a simcha. They opened it before Shabbos and we closed it, and they closed it so tight you can't open it. They did it mamish really well, and the only way to open it if you're using a pliers. So the one that's using the pliers, okay, it's a Kalishim Lachtalissa, Tzorych Gufo Mekayimai, Tzorych Gufo. But for me, I'm picking it up, I'm giving it to him, I'm not even using it. Is that including the heter of La'Tzorech Gufo to give it to another yid? It's a nice mitzvah, but I'm not using it. And then there was another shayla, it was in the bungalow colony, someone saw a Muktza item lying on the floor, and it was an aveida, someone lost it. Can he pick it up and return it? It's Muktza, Kalishim Lachtalissa, he's not using it, but he's using it to get the mitzvah. Is the mitzvah enough of a Tzorych Gufo that you're allowed to return it? How about if the halach is about that aveida, the Harei L'Shul, you're allowed to keep it? Can he pick it up to be zoich in it? Is that considered Tzorych Gufo? And this and many more is the new sugya for today, that when there's a Kalishim Lachtalissa and the heter La'Tzorech Gufo, what is the accurate definition of the word Gufo? Now we'll soon see that really Tzorych Mekayimai is a share for itself. Today we're focusing exclusively on Tzorych Gufo. What is the precise definition of Tzorych Gufo? Is a mitzvah, hashavasaveida enough? Is alone enough? So let me just give a little of Hakdama. I think once we have the aside, hopefully the rest should be simple. Let's say a person is in the bungalow colony and he bought a coconut for dessert, but he has no coconut cracker. So he has two options. Outside of his bungalow, there's plenty of stones. He could pick up a stone and smash the coconut with the stone. What he doesn't want to do, but he could do, is go to a neighbor and borrow a hammer. He feels very funny borrowing a hammer from a neighbor. He doesn't like borrowing b'chlal. But the question is, which is the better option? Picking up a stone or borrowing from a neighbor a hammer? So logically, it would seem that the better eitzah should be a stone, because a hammer is all full of melacha, you boina, you built it. That's a problem. A stone is the Baruch Hashem's creation, it's innocent, but it's not the case. Because we know the Mishnah in Shabbos, Kuf Chav Beis Amabeis, and the Gemara Kuf Chav Gimel Amabeis, a Kalishim Lachtalissa, and the Mishnah's exact example is a hammer to crack a nut is mutter. That's a Kalishim Lachtalissa Tzorych Gufo. But we also know that a stone is Muktza, even La'Tzorech Gufo. What's the chilek? So very simple. The starting point when what determines Muktza or not Muktza is it a kli? When something is not a kli, it's an absolute extreme Muktza. That's machmas Gufo. It's not a keli, and even La'Tzorech Gufo Mekayimai is asa. But a kli shemalachdelis, let's stress the word kli, being that it has that key factor of a keli, so it's not so bad. It might be used for issa, for buying a good, so don't build. Use it to crack your coconut. But at least it has the ikar that it's a keli. And this explains why kli shemalachdelis has more of a heter than machmas Gufo. A stone is not a keli, it's totally out of things. A kli shemalachdelis, at least on the map. So use it properly, La'Tzorech Gufo, and it's okay. But now the question is, the same Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Chav Gimel, you're allowed to use a keli La'Tzorech Gufo Mekayimai, but Michama L'Tzeil is also. Now Michama L'Tzeil literally means it's left in the sun, and Rashi explains the sun baking on it will ruin it, which is rare today. Michama L'Tzeil is lav dafka sun to shade. It means it might get stolen, It might get ruined by the rain. It might be played with children. So we're going to use the word michama l'tzeil, that's the Gemara's term. But michama l'tzeil means it might get ruined or lost or stolen. So the Gemara says that a klisha malachlis, you're allowed to move it to crack a nut. But not michama l'tzeil, not for the preservation of the keli. Now, this now needs obviously a hezbah. Because if we said it has the main criterion, it's a keli. So just like a klisha malachta leheter, you left your sweater outside, you could bring it in so it shouldn't get ruined with the rain, even though you're not using it. Because once it's a keli, it's not muktza. So why all of a sudden by klisha malachta lissa is it asa michama l'tzeil? You see, if shaloi ltzorech klal to move it, that the Shulchan Aruch says even klisha malachta leheter is asa. But if you're allowed to move a regular keli michama l'tzeil, and since a kli shmalach le'issa has that factor of kli, why is cham b'letzelos? So you'll say very simply, on a simple level, I say you can't be in denial. Malachta le'issa is worse than malachta le'heta. But there's something that's much better than that, and that's the yisayid for today. When you look into the Paiskim, when they talk about our sugya malachta le'issa, they use very interesting descriptions of the issa. The Rav in Siv Chav Beis, Kli Shemach Le'issa, Einay Muktza Gemur. It's not a full-fledged Muktza. The Aruch HaShulchan in Shin Yud Aleph, Siv Tezvav, he says it's a Muktza Kala, a lightweight Muktza. But it seems like there's something like wrong with it. It's not a full-fledged Muktza. What's the pshat? So for this we have to know a little bit of history. The Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, and the way the Gemara explains, there was a terrible laxity, there was a terrible easy heroes, asrashtas in Shmir Shabbos. And the Navi felt he has to take some type of a shock treatment, a drastic measure. Something has to be done quickly and effectively to stop this. So as the Mishnah says, they made a takana, only 3 kalim, all the kalim, only 3 kalim can be moved, and those were needed for a Suda. But even a kli malachta leheter was also on Shabbos. Chazal had to go to the other extreme, like the Rambam says, and they asked everything except what's needed for oichel nefesh. Then they realized that the initiative was effective, and things are getting better. They started reducing gradually the issa. So first they said, kli malachta leheter is mutar tzorech gufo mekomo, but not michama l'tzeil. Oh, you're getting better? Okay. Malachti leheter, micham l'tzeil is also mutter. Then, according to the Gemara, they made a heter, ltzorech gufo, or malachti le'issa. But not mekomo. Because don't forget, which is a better heter, gufo or mekomo? About the gufo, right? So they did it incrementally. Gufo is mutter by malachti le'issa. Then they saw people were responding nicely. Okay, well, matter ltzorech mekomo. But cham l'tzeil remains awesome. That is the remnant of the takana to protect and enhance Kedusha Shabbos. So, oy bazoi, we understand that really, lemaisa, a klisha malachta le'issa is not a full-fledged muktzah. The biggest right is allowed to move it, l'tzeil gufo mekomo. So why do we have that remaining issa michama l'tzeil? It's not because of muktzah. It's because of the reason takana to keep Shmira Shabbos. So in other words, if you want to be a lam, you could say, it's not a issa on the cheftza. It's on the gavra. It's to enhance Shmira Shabbos, putting on restrictions that are constant reminders. And that's why, as we'll see, there are many different heterim. There's a heter of kicker oitinik regarding lachtalisa, oide biyodoi, we'll soon see about a bosses. But it's pliadik, the ritva in Shabbos, Kuf Chav Daled Amud Beis, he says that the issa of Muktza, Machlisa is not machas muktzah. Ele osru gzeir mishum haitzah, and lemaisa it's like the gzeir of Nechemia that they made the acid everything. So in other words, the point is that it's not really a full-fledged muktzah. It's not even the regular muktzah. It's a restriction. Oh, that makes sense. Michama l'tzeil, you could live without it, but tzorech gufo mekomo is mutar. But if you want to hear a really powerful description of malachta le'issa, there's a beautiful sugya, hopefully we'll do it one day, to share for itself, and that's the Shabbos bris. Shabbos bris involves many shilas, but for a moil, it's a bit of a nightmare because he has to use his Muktza sakin shel mila, very sensitive and it's very delicate. He has to use it by the mila, and then what? He makes the mila, he puts it down, he makes the metzitza, and then he has his expensive sakin shel mila on the table. What do you do with it? So if you're allowed to move Muktza for mila, because you're allowed to even make mila, which is an av malacha. But after you put it down, why are you allowed to move the sakin shel mila, put it back in its place? So the question is, maybe on Shabbos, since he used it, it's not Muktza, but the Goyin in Bir Agra, Yeridei, Reish Samach Vav, Sif, Cotton Gimel, like many others, hold it's awesome. And you have to find an eitzah, which we'll leave for a different time. But what's neged to us in the most dramatic way, the Goyin is the kasha. As we'll soon prove, when I use that pliers to open my soda, I don't have to drop it on the floor. I can put it back into place. So frek the Goyin, so if you're allowed to put it back in your place after use, so why are you worried about a sakin shel mila? Listen what he says. He said, Dafka klisha malachta le'issa, there's a heter to put it back in its place, she'einei muktzah, she'mutal talta l'tzor gufo makayimai. But a sakin shel mila is a real McCoy, machmas chasar and kiss, that you can't have any leverage to put it where you want. You hear that? He's not saying Muktza kala or einei gemura. Einei Muktza, it's not a Muktza. It's a restriction on some part to leave a remnant, a reminder of keep Shabbos with great devotion. So that's why I saw the Poskim very much embrace this Goyin Shita, the Shevet Alevi, Chelik Yud, Simun and Tes, Boy Re'ei, Losh Rabbeinu Hagra, and he says, so the fact that we call it Muktza Machbas Chisar and Kiss is a Shem Mushal. It's a borrowed term. What else are you going to call it? So here we have a beautiful understanding of the Klisha Malachte Le'issa. That basically it's a remainder of the original Takana. The Meiri and Kuf Chav Dalid, and that's the same sugya, he has another pshat. Chazal allowed you to use it on Shabbos for Shabbos use. Gufo, Mekoimai, but Mechama L'Tzeil, if you're not using it, so when are you saving it for? After Shabbos. That's Tzorech Oil. In other words, the heter of Tzorech Guf Mekoimai was a heter for Shabbos. But to move it on Shabbos from Mitzvah Shabbos, that's Tzorech Oil and it's no heter. So now we see the different descriptions of Klisha Malachta Le'issa. It's a Muktza Kala, Einai Gomor, or Einai Muktz, like the Goyin says. So now we understand much better why there's this in-between. And as I wouldn't say it's a Muktza with a certain compromise. It's not a compromise. It's a different nature of Muktza. So before we apply this specifically, and let's talk about the Shaila of hashavasaveida, or giving it to someone else, how do you touch the word gufo? Tzorech gufo. So I'll tell you, you have to just touch the word. Touch the word ltzorech gufo. Gufo means guf shaloi. Whose guf are you talking about? So on a simple level, gufo means the person. His guf needs a hammer to crack a coconut, or he needs a pliers to open the soda. But it's more logical that he needs the gufo of the keli. He can't open the soda, and a pliers does it in a split second. He needs the guf hakeli to facilitate his objective. Or maybe gufo means for the guf of the keli. You have to do something for the sake of the keli. Now that's wrong. How do I know it's wrong? It's connected to Gemara. Very good. Is awesome. So it can't be guf hakeli for the preservation of the keli. So we're left with two choices. Gufay shel adam, I need it, you need it. Or gufay shel keli, I need the actual keli to use in my context. So the emes is Rashi and Kuf Chav Beis Mad Beis, Davish L'achtel Issa, Ben Shul Tzoich L'shtamesh Begufay shel keli. As clear as day. Rashi means you have to use the keli. And that's also the Chayodam, the Rav, Mishtabura, all say guf hakeli. And the truth is, that's the simple reading of the Tzorech Gufo. But there is a Ratvaz in Chelik Beis, Tafar Shayin Dalit, Tzorech Gufo shel Adam Mutla Taltaloi. And the truth is, both could be true. It's not a stira. either the keli, you need the actual keli, or your guf needs the actual keli. What's the nafkamina? So sit back and enjoy. Because the Maisa, if you think about it, we have two extremes in this halacha. We have the heter of tzarech gufo mekaymai, and michamal etzeil is vadei asa. But there's a lot in between. For example, hashavasaveida is not chamal etzeil. It's a mitzvah for now. But I'm not using it. I'm not taking the Veida and using it because I'm not allowed to use it. It's not even mine. So that's not gufo shel keli. And that l'choira maybe would be gufo shel adam. Because I have a mitzvah hashavasaveida. So how do I teach the tzorech gufo? So here we're going to make of an hapachu. Again, after Chanukah is already Purim. So I'm going to go through the halachas that I found that discuss the our shaylas and more, and see what gufo means, gufo shel adam, gufo keli, and then we'll understand after everything exactly what this Muktza is all about. So let's start with a simple, unavoidable shayla that's negated to every single case of malachta l'issa tzorech gufo. I picked up the pliers, or I picked up the hammer to crack the coconut. Beheter gama, tzorech gufo, a qualified tzorech gufo, and I needed the gufo keli and gufo adam. After I finish, what do I do with the hammer? Do I have to drop it? It's a hot potato. It's Muktza. So, I would say b'derech and drop it onto the table and break the table is not even mutter. Maybe that's included in chamal atzeil. But no doubt about it, I'm allowed to use it. Who said I could put it back? So this is mefurish in Shulchan Aruch and Sif Gimel. Klish v'lachta l'issa, you're allowed to move it l'tzorech gufo. And then he says l'tzorech mekaymai. Now please listen to what he continues. Shetzorech shtamish b'mokem shakli sham, u'mutter litel misham, u'lanichai be'eze mokem sheyirtza. How do you touch those words? U'mutter litel misham. L'chayri means to say, when you have a hammer on the table and you need the place of the table, mutter litel misham, pick it up and put it wherever you want. Okay, so what do we see from the Shulchan Aruch? That if you move the tzorech mekaymai, you don't have to just drop it on the floor so you have the place, then you have the place on the table. You're allowed to put it back in its place. But what I struggled is, how about if I use the hammer and I finish using the hammer and now it's my hand and I'm thinking what to do with it? Is it also mutter to put it back in the tool chest? I'm not sure. The Mechaber says you're allowed to tzorech mekaymai, you can put it back in its place. Why did he say tzorech gufo? So I could tell you why. Because if the heter is the tzorech gufo shel keli, to crack the coconut, so once I crack the coconut, I finish gufo. What justifies putting it back, going to the base and putting it back in the tool chest? And especially the Mechaber, for some reason, says you're allowed to tzorech mekaymai, you can put it back in its place. Why do you leave out tzorech gufo? It bothered me. So I looked up the Torah, Beis Yosef and Darkei Moshe, and there are 5 sources that you're allowed to put mekaymai back in the place. The Magid Mishnah, the Ran, the Ran, the Mordechai Hagoyis Ashri. All 4, you look it up, you'll see the Mordechai, look it up, all 4 are say beferish. If you had a tzorech mekaymai, you needed the place on the table where the hammer was, pick it up and put it where you want. But none of the 4 mention tzorech gufo. Maybe the svara is, if you need the place, so you have to take it off the place, so put it in a different place, maybe. But tzorech gufo, once you crack the nut with the coconut, crack the nut with the hammer, it's no longer tzorech gufo. But then I was thinking, Baruch Hashem, there's a 5th makam, and that is a Tois in Be'ed of Gimel Amud Beis. Tois Beferish says, if you have a tzorech gufo or mekaymai, you can put it wherever you want. Now, could be in svara, tzorech gufo is more of a heter, because tzorech mekaymai, you need a place on the table. Go take it on the table and drop it on the floor. Not so outlandish. But you use an item. Most normal people, most people that are a menschlich, you put it back. You finish. You take out a cup. You don't leave it on the counter on the table. Put it back. Especially svara, you put back things like a mensch. So part of the use is putting it back in its place. So maybe the Shulchan Aruch and the Rishonim chaptan even the mekaymai is mutter to put it back. But the tzorech gufo, I mean, come on, you use someone's hammer, we're going to drop it on the floor. or your own hammer, that's not menshlich. And it's interesting, mamish is a pella. 4 Rishonim, and the Mechaber says Mekomo, but the Shulchan Aruch says Mekomo. The Mishnah Berurah, like almost like matter of factly, when you have it biyadai, you're allowed to put it. Have it in your hand. La'tzorech gufo, oy Mekomo. Put it wherever you want. So he totally ignored the Mechaber's implication and says you're allowed to put it back in its place. La'tzorech gufo oy Mekomo. So that's what I came out with. If someone has a different, I'd like to hear it. But it seems that the Mechaber and the Rishonim say the heter of a mekomo. But it's l'chayra pashit hu adin la'tzorych gufo. Moral mess is machmas sar and kiss. The heter is we'll get to it right in a second. Mamash in a second. Now lamaisa, this is interesting that we've really, the more of a heter probably is by la'tzorych gufo. Now, lamaisa, I should mention the Pri Megadim in our Simon Sif Cotton Zion says there's a heter only to move it around in the same room, but mecheder l'cheder maybe is a problem. However, the Kaf HaChaim Sif Cotton Chav Ches says basically that the minig is lahakal. So once you use the Tzorych Gufo, the heter Tzorych Gufo, you finish with the hammer or the scissor. You could go down to the basement, put it in the tool chest, go to your neighbor and return it. No problem. Now, Lamaisa, the next question is, let's say someone picked up a keli, and someone says, "Oh, it's Muktza. It was a klisha malach delesa, but it wasn't Tzorych Gufo Mekomo." So he thought malach delesa, you allowed to pick it up, but it wasn't. There was no heter. So he's holding a malach delesa, and what should he do? So we would say, you can't put it back into place. What's the heter of what we call oida biyadai? Because it's the tail end of your tzorech gufo. But here, it's not tzorech gufo, it's your tzorech mistake. So it's not tzorech gufo, and it should be awesome. You have to Magen Avram, now with Simon, and then Sif Zion. Magen Avram says, the heter you're allowed to put it back in its place is oida biyadai. Nearly, even if you picked it up by mistake, put it back into place. Now the Mishnah Berurah brings cholkim, and I understand exactly why there are cholkim. Because the heter is not oida biyadai physically. The heter is the end of your tzorech gufo. But who says there's a heter by toyas? So you look, there are 2 days in the Mishnah Berurah, and it's a big richis how halacha l'maisa. But what's also interesting, and that's what you asked, Rabbi Yankel, the Paiskim, the Mishnah Berurah discusses if you have a heter of oida biyadai by other muktzas. Lamashki, you picked up the Ismail Shalmila beheta. Can you put it back in its place? So Mishnah Berurah says there are some that are mekel, oida biyadai. But it's not logical, so Mishnah Berurah, because the Goyin says that it has to be a situation of klisha malach delesa. It's not across the board heter oida biyadai. So that question would be mamish our sugya, but one thing we have to be very clear, a klisha malach delesa, you're allowed to be a mensch, you finish using it, don't just put it on the side, it's not nice to have a pliers, a hammer on the other side of the dining room, put it back in its place, and that's the minig. Now, next question, beautiful shayla. Let me show you how much we can get from one simple yesod. Let's say a person is learning right before Shabbos, it's almost his man, he has a very expensive pen, he likes to use when he writes chedushim, so he puts it on his stender. He has a stender in his study that he never used on Shabbos. Shabbos uses his desk, whatever. So he puts the pen on his stender, b'kavana that it should be safe, and he'll pick it up after Shabbos and he'll continue writing. Shabbos comes for some unforeseen reason, he wants to use his stender. The problem is, it was a buses. Now this is the worst type of buses. It wasn't a shachach that he forgot. It wasn't that I put my pen on your stender. There's no buses if it's not mine or yours. It has to be mine, right? So, but this was a real McCoy buses. It was my stender, bikavana, and it was a bus the whole Bein Hashmoshes. Would you say in that case you can't use a stender the whole Shabbos? So for 2 reasons, it's perfectly mutter. And once you know these sides, it's simple. First of all, even if we assume that the stender became a buses on Shabbos, what type of Muktza does the stender have? It's not worse than Malach Delisa. The buses takes on the identity of the Muktza. But what is a Muktza? A pen. What kind of Muktza is a pen? a bona fide malachta. If someone has no other alternative, he has to scratch his back, he can use a pen. Tzorech gufo. So even if we say it's a basis, it's only a basis of a malachta l'issa. So you're allowed to use the pen that's tzorech gufo mekayimai. So how could the stand to be different? So right away, even if it's a basis, it's a klisha malachta l'issa basis and mutar tzorech gufo mekayimai. But there's something much, much better, much more geschmack for us. What does it mean, basis? You have a table, and you put them in the Chanukah menorah or the Shabbos menorah on the table. And the table's a bust unless you find an option. What's wrong with a nice, innocent table? The teretz is, if you put a burning fire, which is Muktza machmas gufo, don't forget, and it was on bein hashmashos, so it was immobile bein hashmashos. If you could move it, it was like anchored down. But Rabbi Yid, a pen or any malachta le'issa is not anchored down, is not immobile. You can move it ltzorech gufo. You can move it ltzorech mekayimai. It's a mukta sheina gama. It's a mukta kala. Like the goyin, it's not a mukta at all. So vezakt, a movable mukta, makes a basis. And that's definitely pshat in the Prima Godim, in the Psicha Shin Ches, Mishptei Zahav Dalid. He says, a klisha malachta le'issa, tzorech iyan, if it makes a basis or not. Because it's movable. The Yeshua's Yakov, Sivkat Nei, is a little more convinced. The Mincha Shabbos, I saw in Pei Tezbei, the Shmir Shabbos, Chaf Aleph or Tezvav says, Roi Vishonim hold that a malachta le'issa does not make a basis. Beautiful. Because Bemis, it's a movable muktzah. It's almost like an eine muktzah. If it's eine muktzah, who says it makes a basis? So for two good reasons, you can use the shtendam, even if it was a basis, bein hashmashos. Now, a little more of a challenge is the next question. You are fine, your neighbor needs your hammer or your pliers, so can I pick up the item and give it to him? Now the truth is, if the item is mamish laying right there, so please take it. But more often than not, it's in your basement, and even you don't know where it is, but he zicha doesn't. He's going to go to your basement, look for the pliers, so you have to be a mensch. You got to go down and give it to him. Question, now maybe not so simple. Avad, the hammer, the pliers, the malachta le'issa, but the heter is a tzorech gufo. I'm not using it. So loimi boy, I am not using the gufa keli. I'm giving it to him. But even the gufa adam, I have no benefit. I'm not using it. Maybe there's no heter for me to give it to him. I'm getting an extra pair of hands myself involved in touching muktzah for no reason. But then again, Ayi doesn't think that way. His need is my need. He is me. If my gufa adam has a mitzvah of chesed, so why isn't that a tzorech adam? Maybe even tzorech gufo the keli to give someone the ability to open his bottle of soda. So interesting again that this point is that it's like in Gashmi is kol Yisrael reiv zelazeh. They say a story that someone came into the Ger Besmedrash and needed a gartel, so he gave him his gartel for mincha. And who was that yid? The Imre Yemes. So afterwards they went up to Imre Yemes, how you talking? I couldn't believe what happened. He goes, the gartel has two purposes: for davening and to help another yid. So I used it for the other purpose. Okay, that's the story. They say, in Ger was such a big Besmedrash, I can't imagine this happened, but the message is true. Every item has two purposes: for myself and for you. But what's interesting is the Rav in Sif Lamed Gimel, Mr. Rura quotes it in Sif Kot Lamed Daled, says a tremendous yesod that I can't give a keli machlis to a goy. Now this could be problematic. A goy knocks on your door, says, Rabbi, I'm the Shabbos guy. Remember me? Yeah, okay. I need your hammer. Can I borrow it? I'm not doing work for you. I need a hammer for myself. The guy needs chiyuv malachta le'issa. So the Rav says that a goyish tzorech is like a tzorech that's not Shabbosdik. Not because he's going to do a melechas issa. He's not going to just open a coconut. He's going to do building. So the Rav and the Mishmur quotes it, for a goy is considered tzorech achas Shabbos and is asa. But it's pashit from the Rav and Mishnah that to give lahav to another yid is perfectly okay. And Taka the Shmir Shabbos in Chaf Sif Tes, the Chutshani in Chayil Gimel Amud Nun Ches in fact says that that's part of the shimush of a keli to give someone else. So it seems pashit that indeed you're allowed to pick up the keli and give it to your shachin. You have a mitzvah of chesed. That's the tzorech gufo for you as well. The Mikdanas Eliyahu in Cheli Beisim, and the Tessi quotes, if I don't have, I'm a Tolde Shmuel. Tolde Shmuel also discusses this shaila, and he says, Madoch, I could make boira, I could peel eggs and onions, and make for you eggs and onions if it's miyad for the Suda. I could do an Issa Deraisa for Nachayid. So why can't it be Pashit? I could move Muktza for Nachayid. So Lamaisa, there's also a raya from the Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Chav Dalet Ayin Sham. But it seems basically that indeed if the person needs it, you'll have to pick it up and give it to him. Now, obviously, in the rare case that the chayfetz is right there, you could say, please take it because on date. But if it means making him go to the basement, searching, looking, and if he feels like a Shabbos guy, not a Shabbos Yid guy, whatever it is, so the halacha, it's mutter even to pick it up and give it to him. The question that we also wondered about, let's say you're coming home from shul Friday night, and remember that you bought a coconut, you don't have a coconut opener, but you have in the basement, you have a hammer. So you want to save time, you'll get the hammer now, bring it up the steps, bring it into your house, put it in a closet, and for dessert, you'll take out the hammer and open the coconut. The question is, you're making the first tiltal from the basement to your dining room closet, whatever it is now the tzorech gufo. So you could trim it by making one picking it up before the dessert, and bringing it upstairs. So this is interesting. Lamaisa, the first tiltal is a tzorech gufo. I'm going to use it, but it could be eliminated. So I need your help for this question. Let me present what I found. Let's say I left my hammer outside in a place, there's an air, but there are a lot of goyim walking around. And Lamaisa, I don't need a hammer. It's michamol l'tzeil. So if I left it outside, within a half hour, it's going to be gone. A guy will take it. But I know for Shalosh Shudas, I bought a coconut, I'm relying on that hammer. Can I bring it in now, michamol l'tzeil, so I can have it later? I need it for Shalosh Shudas. So you might say, well, now it's michamol l'tzeil, what's the heter? But then again, if I don't, am I achshav? So I found the Tila LeDavid in Shin Ches Sif Hey and Shin Yonal Sif Tes. The Shmir Shabbos in Chaf Oishibes says the same thing. That's mutter. Because even though it's initially michamol l'tzeil, but without it, there's no subsequent use. So it's enough of a tzorech gufo, and you're allowed to do it. So let's accept that as correct. You're allowed to bring the hammer in michamol l'tzeil, otherwise you can have it later for tzorech gufo. Now, can we say, if that's mutter, hu adin, bringing it up before the Suda, for the end of the Suda? In fact, I would even say Kal V'Chayma. When I bring it up, michamol l'tzeil, it's not even a heter, but it's a heter because it's later. Here, the first and second one are basic heter. But there's a big makom l'chalik. Because the case of the michamol l'tzeil, if I don't do it now, Masai, it's not going to be. Here, don't be so lazy, go down to the basement before dessert and bring up the hammer and use it right away. So Lamaisa, the Poskim compare it, in fact make a Kal V'Chayma from the case of michamol l'tzeil. Even though we can think differently. But Lamaisa, what makes sense is that if it's going to be a big tircha later going back to the basement, so that's tircha on Shabbos, don't forget, is also a thing to avoid. But Lamaisa, it seems that the Poskim say that if Lamaisa you can avoid, I'll give you an example. I saw this in one of the Heintige Poskim. Let's say you need a Klish Machta Issa item Shabbos morning. But it's at a place where some of the children are sleeping. So if you go on Shabbos morning, take it out, you can wake up the children. So take it out Friday night and don't stir the children sleep. You're not using it until the next morning, but that's enough of tzorech gufo that makes it mutter. Question, someone has a shaila, he wants to move the hammer, he thinks he has a coconut, but he doesn't have a nutcracker to open or any other advice. He might end up using it l'tzorech gufo, not sure. Is there a heter when he's suffik? So what came to my mind is the Taz speaks about on Hilchas Yom Tiv, l'tzorech is asa. So he says, but you're allowed to carry a knife when you walk in Sharabim, because Shem is daman loy peri, maybe someone or you have a peri to eat, and you don't bite into a peri, you cut it up. So Shemi is Amalei peri, you're allowed to carry it. So you see, Lagabi carrying on Yom Tiv, which Tzorych Klal could be an Issa Deraisa, the Rashi holds. But if a suffix you might do it is mutter, so obviously a suffix is part of human life. Look how many people were so worried about the storm yesterday. They did so many things. Maybe it's only a suffix, but we provide for sveikas. So I saw the Migdanas Elio and the later Tshuva Cheli Gimel Simon Lamed Gimel, and so also the Orcha Shabbos both say for a suffix use is also considered Tzorych Gufo. That's human nature. He might need it. I saw a good example. A person has a fan blowing and he wants to turn it to his direction. So we'll talk about that if that's the heter of Tzorych Gufo or Mekomo, but it's Zichem Mutter to move a fan in any direction. The question is, can he pick up the plug and hold on to it? Because if he moves it maybe too quickly, the plug might come out. So the plug he's not really using, but Lamaisa, otherwise he's not going to have the fan. So that would be, first of all, the plug is part of the keli, so it's Tzorych Gufo. But it's also a concern of Shema. Shema is enough of a concern that does legitimize you moving the Muktza. Someone asked me a nice shaila, a Yer Shemayim shaila. He has a food package and different wrappers, all these type of things that really allow to tear it apart because it's only like a oral piachavius, it's not a keli. But he knows when he tears it, he can't control his tearing. Sometimes it slides this way and he tears lettering. So he'd much rather take a scissor, so it can be very controlled cutting. With the scissor, you cut through the plastic and you avoid all lettering. And he's right. 10 out of 10 times, he doesn't tear lettering. But when he tears it, sometimes it goes this way, he can't predict. So I said, that's a beautiful example of Klisha Malach Delisa. Ltzorech Gufo. The scissor sounds terrible. It's not worse than a hammer. So you could pick up the scissor, cut it, and put it back in its place. It should be okay. People ask this child, they have a big simcha or a big family. The kids at the cholent pot, put a frying pan in the blech, a huge pot. Shabbos after the Suda, there's a little bit leftovers. But you can't fit the pot in the refrigerator. It's just too big or it takes up too much room. They want to transfer the leftover cholent from the big pot into a small pot and put it in the refrigerator. So this is tricky because we'll soon see if you could avoid using a Muktza, then don't use the Muktza. If you have a regular plastic container, so put it in the container and put it in the refrigerator. But you are smarter than that. You want to put it into the pot, so Sunday night, you'll warm it up for Sunday supper. Very nice. But that's a Muktza l'tzoyer choil. You're not doing it for Shabbos. Shabbos you have a simple eitzah. Now, but let's say he doesn't have a plastic container. He has to put it in a small pot. So that's a perfect example. A pot is a kli shemalach d'le'issa l'tzoyer gufo. The only problem is, in his house, till he finds the pot he needs, he has like 10 pots and blocking a whole, you have to move 10 pots to get to that pot. Oh, that's also mutter. That's the tzorech mekayma. He needs the place where the pot is because it's blocking his access. So believe it or not, he could move the other pots and use the pot if there is no other viable option. We'll soon see what that means, but that's basically the yesod. So this is, again, another example of a tzorech gufay, that's mutter, and even matter, moving things, that's tzorech mekayma. Now, another beautiful shot, I don't know how this is so negeya, but it's such a beautiful point, I wanted to mention it. Let's say someone had a small pot, and didn't have a handle, but he used it for cooking. And Shabbos came, and Taka was a regular pot. He decided on Shabbos, he's obviously a very hasty decider. He decided, from now on, I'm not using this for cooking. I'm using this pot from now on as a storage container, because it's not so practical, whatever. He decides, and it's not a rum, it's the real deal. He decides from now on, this is no longer a pot, it's a container. And now he wants to move it, that pot, michamul atzeil. What would you say to that? So you'll say like a lamdan, what do you mean? I'm sorry, you woke up too late. Because migis katzai lebein hashmashos, katzai lekuli yoma. And if when Shabbos kicked in, it was a pot is muktza. So you can't change the status on Shabbos. Just like you can't change the status of a table that's a base to a fire. But I saw a Prima Godim, and it's very mistavra. Zok the Prima Godim in Sifkotten in Sifkotten Tez Zayin. Zok the Prima Godim that it's probable, he doesn't say definitely, but probable, that by a malachta le'issa, there is no concept of iskatzoi lebein hashmashas. And for us, it's masik mitzvah hashmamish. Because lamaisa, bein hashmash is not really muktza. You could use it freely, play tzorych l'mekayim. And I would even add a little more gishmak, it's probably a prima godim l'shitase. Prima godim that says that there is no basis by a malachta le'issa because it's very much mobile and usable. So why should it be skatzoi? For the same reason, it is not a skatzoi lebein hashmashos. Now, what's important to mention, let's say I have a coconut. So a coconut, there's no alternative. You can't use a coconut cracker, they don't make them. But let's say I have a regular need a nut, okay? And I have a nut cracker, but it's someplace downstairs and I'm upstairs, but I have a hammer upstairs. When we say gufo is mutter, how about if there's another option, but it involves tircha or involves borrowing from a neighbor? I have a hammer to crack my nuts, but my neighbor has a nutcracker. Maybe I should go to him and avoid using a hammer. So the emes is in svara that who says that it's us if you have an alternative? If we understand Chazal that did not asa a kalish machlisser, a gufo mekaymei, it's a muktzakala, ain't a gemura, ain't a muktza. So why do you have to have nervin and say, do I need it, I don't need it? Just use it. And taka the tois for Shabbos in Akdama, hitiru Chazal, even if it's efsha, to avoid using a muktza item, because you're using it, it's a gufo, what's wrong? Lamaisa, the hezbis pashit. It's not muktza. So if it's not muktza, what's the problem? And taka the ber Moshe, I saw in the tshuva, chel ches ayin hey, but I found earlier, the mincha Shabbos, pei ches lamed gimel, the das Torah, quotes the tois for Shabbos, that even if you have an alternative, malachta le'issa is an option. However, the Mishnah Berurah, so you've cut in Yud Beis, he says, you're allowed to use a malachta le'issa when you have no other keli l'shtamish. But if you have another heter, why use an issa? And in the Sharatzian, he brings a raya from a Gemara, Ayin Sham, it's a little bit arichas, I'm not going to get into it, but he brings a raya to this concept that if you could avoid using the issa, use a heter, even if it means having to get that heter which is out in front of you. So what's the hezbollah in this? Maybe the hezbollah is pasha. Avada, you're right. There is a heter tzar gufay, but it's not tzar gufay. You don't need the gufa keli. The other doesn't need the gufa keli. You have an option in the other room, go get your nutcracker. What are you using a hammer for? So the question is it like there's no muktza, or the heter is tzar gufa, and this is not tzar gufa? You can manage without it. And Bemis before the Mishnah Berurah, the Re'aim Horowitz says, there has a goyis in the back of the Gemara Shabbos, Kuf Chav Daled, and Shevet Alevi, the Shmir Shabbos, and the Gus Moshe, Chelkei Chaf Alef Yud Beis, all say that we do paskin like the Mishnah Berurah. If there is another alternative, that should be pursued. It's not across the board heter. Now, Rav Moshe does say, from the Mishnah Berurah's Lashon is mashma, that the option is not difficult. If it involves difficulty, l'mashal borrowing from a neighbor, people feel very uncomfortable borrowing from a neighbor. So I have to go to my neighbor and get a nutcracker. I'd rather use my hammer. Or it's a tircha to go to the basement in the Pesach department and find a nutcracker and hope no one else gets it, chametzlik. So if it's a tircha, and don't forget Shabbos, we avoid tircha. And Isaac saw the shulchan ches yudal says if it involves tircha, so maybe al Shabbos avoid tircha. So it's hard to give a klal how much tircha is needed, but it makes sense that since Lamai Taisa Shabbos is mekel lechatchila, so once you have somewhat tircha, and definitely borrowing from a neighbor is something that's not considered an option for many people. So if you can avoid it, or it needs some type of tircha or some type of being uncomfortable, we definitely have a heter to use it, the one you have now, even though it is feasible to find a nutcracker. Now, Lamaisa. The next question, also a beautiful shaila. Let's say I left my expensive hammer outside. Again, it's in the city where there's an Erev, but there are goyim. Within a half hour, it's gone. So I decide, guess what? We're changing our menu for dessert. We're having almonds, or having walnuts. Baruch Hashem, I don't have a nutcracker. I need a hammer. I'm going to go out right now, bring in the hammer, and use it now. But the problem is, the whole thing is harama. And like I say in America, who are you fooling? So the shaila is there a heter to create a need of tzorech gufo, which is legitimate. But again, harama is frowned upon. We have it in Hilchos Yom Tov and other places. So Reza Pella, Magen Avram, Sivkat and Ches, Amacham Tzeil is also. He says, but it's a Beferish Yishalmi in the beginning of the 5th parak in Beya, that if you make a harama, the case is a little complicated, but when you make a need, you're allowed to move a Muktza, Mechama L'Tzeil, because you created the need for that keli. Mamish our Shaila is a Beferish Magen Avram, and like the Magen Avram is a Beferish Yishalmi. So, Lamaisa, there's a lot of discussion, is the Araya or not? Lamaisa, the Pashtis is like the Magen Avram says, others learn a different Shab, or Chashukhan says it's not correct. The Magen Avram has an Eisen Araya from Yishalmi, that you're allowed to make harama and move a keli, not michama l'tzeil, chas v'shalom, l'tzorych, you are newly created tzorech gufay. The Mishnah Berurah and Sivkat and Dezayin, the Archashochan, you see Yodalit, Paskins, when there's a hefsid, of course. But Lamaisa, the question is manashtana. If in other areas of halacha we don't accept harama, why is this mutter? I think it's pashut. The harama was to create the need, but once you have the dessert, you have walnuts, and you can't open it without a hammer, now it's a genuine tzorech gufay. So once you have the need, it's a regular tzorech gufay. Now, of course, if the person has a nutcracker, so to say I'm going to get the hammer because I'll use the hammer, that went back to Mishnah Berurah's point. But if Baruch Hashem he doesn't have a nutcracker, this l'chayra making a harama to create a need is within the heter of tzorech gufay. Now, Lamaisa, someone asked me a good question. The Mishnah Berurah says that if you have an alternative, if you have a nutcracker close by, don't use a hammer. So he said, so why, now you're sort of making a need. Why is that the same issa? I told him it's not the same issa. If you have a need to open a nut, you have a hammer right here, and in the other room you have a nutcracker. So go and get the nutcracker, no big deal. But here, once you brought the walnuts to the table, you have no nutcracker. You're going to have to bring in mechama l'tzeil. So once you have the need, there's no other choice. And that's taka why we understand that once you have that need, avada, you're allowed to bring it in and use it, gesund heit. Now, the next question, a child is crying, a baby's crying, and obviously a rattle will pacify the baby. If you give the baby the toy, the baby likes to play with it. The problem is that a rattle is a kli miyochel hashmos kol as muktza. So how could you give it to a child? Why is it sapina biyadayim? So that's pashut. The Bialocha quotes the Rashba in Shin Mem Gimel that under Rabbanan there's no issa safina the tzorcha of the child. But the question is for the father to pick up the rattle. The rattle is a mamash muktza. Don't forget, the father give it the child to play with. There's no issa of making noise. But how could the father move the rattle? The rattle is a klisha melachta l'issa. There's this pashut. We said earlier, I can move from the chayid, certainly for my own child. Now here I saw an interesting yisoid. The Megillas, the Shmir Shabbos, the Archa Shabbos, all the Heintige Pais say this is mutter. It's Muktza, but it's a melachta l'issa, l'tzorech gufay of the rattle. The Megillah Sefer in Perik Member of Siv Ches, he says, he quotes the Shmir Shabbos that's matter this, he says, but there's a problem. Because the child is doing a meleches issa. The whole time you have a heter of tzorech gufay is, if we do heter, we crack nuts, we open soda. We never had a situation that the receiver is doing a meleches issa. And maybe the heter is the tzorech gufay to do heter. Maybe meleches issa is like the Lahav giving it to a guy. There's no heter. But the Ma'is Mishnah Berurah is the Shmir Shabbos is mekel. Probably the heter is, if he's doing a beheter, it's not an issa. The child is doing a beheter because he's a child. Moving an urn or crockpot. This is negeya because today they have these big, huge cups and they don't fit onto the urn, the spout. You have to move the urn to the end of the counter and move it back. So, avada, an urn, a crockpot are all a malachta le'issa, but it's a tzorech gufay. Now, the emes is that the urn and crockpot have a different heter. The Gemara in Shabbos, Al Sugi Kuf Chav Daled, says if you have a maducha, a grinder, which is a klish machlisa, you can't move it. But if there's shum, if there's garlic inside, the garlic that you ground before Shabbos, you can move the maducha, because now it's a basis for heter. So obviously, a crockpot and an urn is a basis for the heter. So avad, you're allowed to move the urn and crockpot. Just be careful; the plug shouldn't come out. Question: you see a klisha malachta le'issa on top of a seifa. Someone put an item, a screwdriver, something on top of a seifa, and you can't keep an item on top of a seifa. But why are you moving it off? Ltzarech gufo, you're not using the hammer. Tzarech mekayma, you don't need the place. So the emes is, some say, but I can't look at an item on top of a seifa, cover a seifa. So I say, it's probably more cover a seifa to do what says in the seifa. And if that's tzarech guf mekayma, what's the heter? It reminds me that Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky was made, he once saw a piece of a Gemara, a Shemus they call it, on the floor. On Shabbos, he picked it up. Chazon Ish says it's Muktza. If it has a pasuk, Rashi, you can learn it. But it's just a few letters and it's not even legible. So, moving Muktza for cover of a sefer is not mutter. It's like cleaning a hat because I want to look nice on Shabbos. But on Shabbos, a nice hat is a dirty hat. So, Lamaisa, the moving it biyadayim should be wrong. But there's a simple eitzah, and that is pick up, move the sefer, and it'll come falling off. That's tiltum and that's tzarech davar mutter. Now, of course, the sefer is not a basis for the screwdriver because the person wasn't the bailam to make it a basis. So it's probably better to do things correctly, not impulsively, and then you're okay. Punkt this Shabbos, someone asked me, he had a silver tray, not a big one. It was basically a tray that had no identity, but he uses it when he has guests. The family come, they light their neighbors on the tray. This Shabbos he had no guests, and he wanted to use it to serve food. It wasn't exclusively a neighbor's tray, it was a tray, a silver tray. And the answer is, this is a beautiful example of our sugya. This is a klisha malachta le'issa because it's a basis for the neighbors typically on many Shabbos, but now it's not being used. So it's a regular klisha malachta le'issa, there's no miskatzai bein hashmashis. If there's no other alternative, avad and avad, you can use it, ltzorech gufo. The tricky question is, you find an aveida on Shabbos. Again, in a place you're allowed to carry, with an Erev, in a bungalow colony. Bekitza, you see an aveida, you know whose it is, you want to pick it up and return it to the person, but the problem is, it's a klisha malachta le'issa, it's a hammer. So the good news is, if you know your friend needs his hammer, so then you're allowed to bring it to him, without a hashavasaveida, because I could bring something to you. But your friend is not going to use the hammer. The question is, can I violate hilchas muktza to mikayem hashavasaveida? Is that considered tzarech gufo? So one thing is clear. Chasam Sofer says it in a few words in Archaim, in the Tshuva Siman Pei Beis. If it's a full-fledged muktza, I can't pick it up and return it l'shem mitzvah, because you can't do a mitzvah by doing an aveira. And he says, Nachan Ladina Bar, you can't be Mekayim a mitzvah that involves moving Muktza. Even though they say, hashavasaveida is the Raisa, Muktza the Abanan, but you don't make those concessions. The only issue here is, since it's a klisha malachta le'issa, it's a hammer, maybe it's included in tzarech gufo. But then again, this is mamash our shayla. Is that tzarech gufo of the keli? No. Is that tzarech gufo adam? It's not really. I mean, a mitzvah is a great tzorech. But Chazal tzorech gufay means you're using the keli for yourself or the gufa keli. And Rabbi Shlomo Zalman in Minchas Shloimeh Tinyana, the end of Sim Mem Gimel, he says first he thinks, Madach you're allowed to use the hammer to crack a coconut. I'll live without a coconut, but your tzorech guf is mutter. So isn't a mitzvah even a bigger tzorech guf? But then he says, and this is printed in the Shmir Shabbos, beautiful discussion in Perek Chaf, Ha'ara Chaf Tes. It's also in Shulchan Shloimeh. He has an interesting way of thinking. He says, let's say a father tells a child, move that muktzah, I don't like it might get lost. And the father's not amoritz. He's not a bad person. He doesn't know that you're not to move a chambal tzeil. So the son starts to think, do I have to listen to my father? It's kibbut of. So maybe it's tzarech gufo mekayim. I need a gufa moving to myself or mitzvah. Nonsense. You can't do a mitzvah and say it's a gufay. So Mr. Alman says, Nachmer, let's say, listen to this, let's say my item is outside as it gets stolen. Can I bring in my item? No, why not? It's mechambal tzeil. So if I can't do it for my own, I have to do it for someone else. And he concludes that basically the mitzvah is wonderful. I can't overestimate a mitzvah, it's so big. But it's not tzarech gufay. If I don't do it to my own, I can't do it for you. I give you a better mashal. Let's say I'm walking in the bungalow colony. There's an item, and halacha l'maisa, it's harei elu shaloi, the finders keepers. Can I pick it up? But it's machtel issa. But it's tzorech gufo. I don't want to lose the opportunity. That's called mechamel etzel. Don't fool yourself. So Yenim's Aveida is not better than mine. I think I also saw the Evan Yisrael that Bisal Yanka Fisher in the Chelik Tessim and Chav Tes has this very shaila and holds it's not considered tzorech gufo and it's us. And last but not least, I'll tell you, my story is a true story. I couldn't make this up even if I tried. Someone, a big Baal Chesed, he took a Yosem under his wings, basically raised him, spent a lot of money on him. And Bekitza, he got married, made him a beautiful Shabbos Sheva Brachos. I wasn't there, but someone told me he was there. And it was Shabbos right before Chanukah. And he bought him a beautiful, beautiful menorah. And he had a whole speech how the Chassan is like Torah and Chanukah is Torah, a whole nice, beautiful speech. And he picked up the menorah and says, here, I'm giving it to the Chassan. I know halacha that you can't be make a kinyan, so someone was koined on behalf of the Chassan. I'm proud to give him what he deserves. Here's the menorah. And someone yelled, Muktza, drop it! And there went the whole party. I mean, he's worth millions, and now he's worth less than 2 cents. How can he make such an Irish mistake? Pick up a menorah. So the Rav HaMechiach has to ask Mechila. Because if you think about it, what this person did is a Beferish Gemara, l'chayra, certainly a Beferish B'kiveiga. What am I talking about? Let me explain. A menorah that was burning into Shabbos, Friday night into Shabbos, like the Noshim's menorah, the Leichter, is Muktza. Why is it Muktza? What's wrong? Bosses for the Eish. The Eish is Machmas Gufay, it takes on the identity. But a menorah that was not used, or a Leichter that's not used, let's say you need something in the break front, and the Leichter that when your daughter comes, she uses, is in the way. You can move it. Why? It's not bosses. What kind of Muktzah is it? Malach Telissa. So Tzarech Mekayimai. Zogt the Gemara in Beya, famous Gemara, you're allowed to send a gift on Yom Tiv, even if it's tefillin. We don't wear tefillin on Yom Tiv. Tefillin is considered malach issa, but the gift is considered tzorech gufo, because I have a benefit. I'm making a ava v'reus, and the simchas Yom Tiv. Zogt Rabbi Eiga in Shin Vav, and Shabbos on Magram have Vav. From Toises and Shabbos, that says giving a gift is considered tzorech gufo. So to Eiga, I would believe you're allowed to give a chasen, his drasha geshank. He spells that out. That he gets after he gives his drasha, and even though you're giving him a menorah, that's muktzah. But this a klisha malach isla tzorech gufo, and it's perfectly mutter. So you can't get better than Eiga. So it's a Tosfos, a Gemara, and a Eiga. Now, the only logistical problem is that if the menorah is so valuable, it might be a chasar and kiss. If chasar and kiss, no heter tzorech gufo mekayim. That's number one. Number two, if you hold that the only heter number two is a bigger problem. If the heter is that I am using it, this is my tzorech gufo to give it to the chassan, that's fine for you. What's the heter for the chassan to take it? So maybe in the case of Kivega and the Gemara, you put it down and he took it after Shabbos. But the Paiskim do say logically that the chassan, for him it's also tzorech gufo. You don't have to use it you don't have to just look at it, you want to pick it up, you want to feel it's mine. So if you assume that's correct, the chassan can pick it up. But no doubt about it, this is, surprisingly enough, a simple tzorech gufo. Now the Paiskim do qualify this. It's tzorech gufo because of the simcha that's very much important in these days. Either it's Yom Tiv or Chassan during Sheva Brachos. But it seems on a regular Shabbos that there's no mitzvah of Simcha Shabbos, it's Einik Shabbos. So it wouldn't apply. It has to be the mitzvah of Simcha, which you're giving a tzorech gufo, and that's mutar. Good talk to you all.
Shem agency to like your biggest character of Smith for today's share to have the schus of sponsoring a share. Call agency heter 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Chananya ben Akash Emiratzak is Bochel Zakis as the show figure Hebron to Mitzvah Nemal and Nechofas Aman Sudgoy Yagdol Terviade. Okay, Mr. Sikkim is the Tzorech Gufo.
Let's just chaz out we learned today, Bez Hashem, Klisha Malach L'Issa is unique Muktza. That's basically the point. It's a keli, it's not Machmas Gufo, it's not Chsar Kis, it's not Machmas Issa, which you can't use, it's a Bas B'chalav. This is a keli, so it has the ikar of a non-Muktza. But Lamaisa, as it seems that Chazal allowed L'tzorech Gufo Mekaymai, but Chamal L'tzel is part of the original takana, or it's a shmira, but basically it's not, it's a non-Muktza or a Muktza Kala, ain't a Gemura, that has a heter L'tzorech Gufo Mekaymai. It also has a heter of Oide B'yodei, like we said. There's a heter of Kikar Tinek. There's no basis, there's no Migis Katzoi, because it's not a regular Muktza, it's certainly a either partial Muktza or non-Muktza that has an Issach Mechamal L'tzel. What does it mean, Tzorech Gufo? Either the Gufo Adam needs it, or the Gufo, you need the Gufo Keli, but to save the Gufo Keli, that's Mechamal L'tzel. After you use it, you're allowed to put it back in its place. Other Muktzas, this doesn't apply, but this would be Oide B'yodei, which is not just the physical Oide B'yodei, but that's the Shimush. The Gemara Shimush is what justifies putting it back in its place. If you picked up a Keli by mistake, you probably should not put it back in its place. Mishnah is not klar, he's a chra. Also, by other Muktzas, there is no heter of Oide B'yodei, it's only Klisha Malach L'Issa is mutter to put it back in its place. As we said, there's no bosses by Klisha Malach L'Issa. A pen on a stand doesn't make a bosses because, number one, it's not worse than the Muktza. There's a mutter L'tzorech Gufo Mekaymai, and also it doesn't make a bosses. Lending to others an item, if he can't get it easily on his own, you're allowed to give it to him. You're allowed to take it now to use later. We also said you're allowed to take Mechamal L'tzel if later it won't be there, it'll be stolen. If you might need a Malach L'Issa, you're allowed to move it L'tzorech Gufo. You're allowed to transfer from a big pot into a small pot if there's no container or any other viable option. If there's an alternative which does not involve tircha or the discomfort of borrowing, then get the item. But if there is a tircha or the discomfort of borrowing, you're allowed to move it. Use what you have, even though it is an eitzah, which is difficult. Harama is mutter to order to move the keli. Giving a baby a rattle is okay. Using a tray that's usually used for leichter, if there's no other tray, is fine. A mlachlis on top of a sefer, better shake it off, don't move it. To both a aveida and I said keep it over aim, the father wants you to do it. They're big mitzvahs, but that's not Tzorech Gufo. To give a matana on Yom Tiv or to a chasin, you're allowed to give it to him, and probably you can take it as well. Yes, Ramesh.